Welcome, everyone. It's now 1 o'clock Eastern, so let's get started. My name is Ann Fannin, and on behalf of the CAFCE board, I would like to welcome you to the second of a series of webinars on the federal government's new Student Work-Integrated Learning program. So today we're joined by Teresa Davis-Woodhouse, who's the Director of Project Management and Accreditation, and Robert Donald, the Executive Director, both of the Canadian Council for Aviation and Aerospace. Teresa and Robert will provide a high-level overview of their SWILP project, and then they'll be available to answer your questions. And of course, we're so pleased to have all of you join us today to be able to give you some additional information on the program and to address those questions. As with our last webinar, a couple of administrative notes before we begin. So in order to ensure the best audio quality for all of our attendees, we've muted the phone lines. If you have a question during the webinar, please ask it by using the chat feature in the bottom left of your screen. I'll collect the questions and then direct them to Robert and Teresa after their presentation component is finished. We are recording this webinar, and we will make it available on the CAFCE website for anyone who is unable to join us today or who would like to refer to its content at a later date. And of course, if new questions about the program arise or we're unable to answer all of your questions today, please do submit them to cafce@cafce.ca, and we'll forward them along to Robert and Teresa. And with that said, I will hand things over to Robert and Teresa.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hear you already had a kind of an overview of the program, so we'll go through our information quickly and then allow for questions. There we go. So the Student Work-Integrated Learning Program, we're one of the project partners for this, one of the 5 that have just been chosen. And the program is focusing on occupations in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and business. It's to offer work-integrated learning positions that are of quality and to help out the small and medium-sized companies that couldn't otherwise hire or place a student in a work-integrated program. So we're one of the partners that will be delivering the program, working with employers and post-secondary education institutes in the aviation and aerospace sector. Under the program, employers offering quality work-integrated learning placements to students will be eligible to receive wage subsidies through CCAA. So we facilitate the payments and the application forms and such. So employers will receive wage subsidies of up to 50% of the wage cost for the placement, or up to 70% for first-year students, underrepresented groups, which includes women in STEM, Indigenous students, persons with disabilities, and recent immigrants. Just to focus on the women in STEM, so the program is focused on STEM programming and business. Underrepresented groups is only women in STEM, not women in business. I'm sure you all know what the work-integrated learning refers to, but in our case, it can include co-op placements, internships, field placements, or applied projects that are solving particular problems for employers. For eligibility, we've listed 2 slides here, and the first one is the participant or the student must be a full-time student currently registered in a STEM program or a business program at a Canadian post-secondary education institute, be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or hold refugee status. The participants on a student or work permit are not eligible. Sorry, I stumbled over that. Foreign students are not eligible for this particular program. Must be legally entitled to work according to the relevant provincial legislations and regulations. They have to consent to release of employment information to ourselves and to the Government of Canada during the placement and at the end of the placement. CCAA, I'm not sure about all of the different organizations, but we will be doing follow-ups, and occasionally we'll actually be doing physical visits to the companies. They need to provide proof of enrollment, and they have to complete one of the information forms that we provide. Employers also have to complete one of the information forms. They have to provide us with a brief description of the company. They have to confirm also that the participant is a full-time student. We are going to be putting that responsibility on the employer. They need to provide the job description or a learning plan for the position. That's the way we can ensure it is a well-thought-out quality placement that the student's going to be doing. The job placement, we've decided needs to be, we do have flexibility, but we'd like to see it a minimum of 12 weeks, and we prefer 16 weeks. We do have some flexibility in the way that's offered. We have had a couple companies ask if it could be 1 or 2 days a week for a very long term, so it comes out to about the same amount of hours, but done in a bit of a more flexible manner, and we do have some flexibility on that, and we're going to judge that on a case-by-case basis. Employers must provide proof of placement employment. They have to have a start date, a contract, or an agreement with the participant or with the co-op department, full wage, and they have to provide us with the full wage information. We're going to require from the employer not just this is how much we're paying the student, but we need to see either a payment stub or proof of transfer or something like that. We have to confirm that the wages for the positions are not funded by another federally funded program, such as MyTAC. They need to complete the employer information form that we will provide. And if this is the first time that we've done a wage subsidy type programming with this particular company, we do have a contract that we want to enter into with them. And we've used these in the past for some of our other wage subsidy programs. And as we're going along, like I guess everybody else, we've discovered that this is a very sought-after program. Therefore, we're going to, for the first year, be capping the number of placements a company can take, or else they're just going to swoop up all of them. So we need to put a cap on the number of placements, so like 1 or 2 placements. So we are still working out that final number. We'd also like to determine a minimum number of placements for each province and territory to make sure that the program is being equally available. It's equally available across Canada and the territories. Again, you know, we've had a lot of interest from one particular province because they got the word out really quickly, and we don't want to see all the placements go into one section of Canada. We do want it to be spread out. It's going to take 5 or 10 days to complete an application. We do it in-house, so anyone who wants the forms, a company who approaches us and needs the forms, they have a student in mind, they would contact me. I would provide those forms to them, and then we can very quickly turn that around. And then I'm going to hand this now over to Rob because our program has 2 sections to it, and we want to tell you a little bit about the other piece of our project.
Thanks. Just a couple of comments on what Teresa said. As she alluded to, we had put in a small number of projected placements for year 1 because we thought it would take us a while to get the word out, etc. I think we have 85 available in the first year, and it's not an exaggeration to say that we are getting close to sold out for year 1.
We're a good 2/3 into it,
yeah.
Almost 3/4.
Which is a bit disappointing for us and for industry. We make this big announcement and then we're sold out early. So I mentioned that years 2, 3, and 4, we have many hundreds of positions available. The other important thing is that this is a 4-year project. Like all of the organizations, it is guaranteed for 2 years. If we meet the targets, then it's extended for the further 2, but it, in theory, has already been approved for 4. So what we're encouraging companies to do is look at a 4-year strategy, not just apply for this year, but when they're doing business with us to tell us, okay, we'd like to, over this 4-year period, this is our plan, and that helps us plan long term. So, and I think it's good for the companies. We have a number of companies who are facing retirement waves and upskilling needs, and so they're using this as a strategic tool to upskill their workforce. A final comment, the suite next to us is undergoing construction, and periodically we have dramatic amounts of noise in the background. I apologize if it happens. It doesn't usually last long, but that's what's going on. Teresa alluded to two aspects to the project. The first is just the co-op funding in our industry. The second is to redevelop the curriculum. Our industry told us they no longer need segmented trades. In our world, there's maintenance, there's avionics, which is electronics, there's people who work on the interior of planes. There's many, many segmented trades. And the industry has said we need something that is more multidisciplinary. So we are working with a consortium of 9 companies to combine learning outcomes for various trades. People are not obliged, and working with colleges to do that and develop a new program for our industry. We think that's the wave of the future. Government agrees and has funded the development costs for that. It's tricky. It's not easy. Schools all work within parameters. Each of the programs that we are talking about, example, maintenance, has already got a curriculum set out. Colleges tell us, well, Transport Canada requires we teach this. There's no room to add stuff. So it's tricky. It's not going to be easy. Companies are not obliged to participate in that to get the wage subsidy, but it is part of what we're working on. And so if there is interest in working with us on that, either at a college or university level or from some of your employers, we'd be happy to have more people participate in the consortium. That's really the overview. We're happy to answer questions.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Robert and Teresa. We have received a number of questions as you were going over the program. So I'll start with what we chatted about slightly before the webinar started, which is, so if we have some schools on the line and they think they have some employers that would be interested in these wage subsidies, how should they go about moving forward and connecting with you?
Right now we've had mostly contact with the employers, so if a co-op department has mentioned to a particular company that this is available, that they should look at this type of funding, the employer has been calling us, and I'm happy with that. So if we hear from the employer directly, we can start the paperwork right away by sending them the forms and getting it rolling.
Okay.
So email or phone call to Teresa.
Mm-hmm. Email or phone call to Teresa, and it's the employers directly.
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
That just makes it faster. I mean, it's not. We don't care if the co-op department's involved. We encourage that, but that's the fastest way forward.
Perfect. Thank you. So one of the questions I've heard come in about a number of the SWILP projects, and it relates to some of the academic components that are part of a traditional co-op program already. And so the question specifically says most universities already have in place learning objectives and reflections that students have to fill in at the start of a co-op work term. And they're wondering if that would be acceptable as a learning plan for the students.
Probably yes. We haven't seen them, but I'm guessing the answer is yes.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Do you have any component with your program where the students have an application piece as well, or does it all go through the employer?
We go through currently all of the positions have worked out that the employer has somebody in mind for the position. So they take the form and hand that to the applicant, the participant. Right. And it is channeled back through the company to us.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's great. And the next question is, for your program in particular, can the SWILP subsidies be held in pure research labs associated with aerospace and aviation, or does there need to be an industrial component?
You know what, we'd have to probably verify that, but I would think an industrial component would be...
We want hands-on experience.
Required?
Is generally the objective. We could look at a research component on a one-off, but the objective is hands-on experience.
We do have a placement that's going to be taking place at a research facility, but it is a partnership with local industry.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. Is it your recommendation that an employer get approved before making a hire to ensure they have the funds?
They must get approval before they hire.
Okay.
Going forward.
Generally, yes.
That's
right.
generally the rule,
That's
yes.
what we would like to see is that because, I mean, we have had already a couple applications that we assumed would work out and didn't, and so, you know, it is best if we do the pre-approval, and it doesn't take long.
That's great.
Yeah.
When Teresa said 5 to 10 days, that's the initial phone call, sending them the forms, a couple of days for them to get the forms back. The contract's pretty straightforward, but if they send it to their legal department and want to look it up and down, fine. But actually approving it, Teresa does that in a day.
Great. There's a question that has come in about job posting platforms. So some of the industry associations or industry partners are using Magnet, and there's a question as to whether or not you will be engaged with Magnet.
We will be. We've just set up an account with Magnet, so it'll probably be a couple weeks before that all gets off the ground. But yes, we are going to be using Magnet.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is a definition question. And so it has come in for these projects. So for your project, what's the definition of a small and medium enterprise?
There's a legal definition, but which frankly I don't have at the tip of my tongue, but I think we know it's not restricted to SMEs. I mean, we do have some of the majors, Air Canada being one of them. So we are tending to favor companies with under 100. We want to make sure that companies with under 100 employees are benefiting from this program as well, and that we're not just simply feeding Boeing, Bombardier, and Air Canada.
Right. Okay. Thank you. The next question I think is pretty straightforward. Are university engineering students also eligible?
They are if their placement is at a aviation or aerospace company.
Great. Thank you. Looping back to a few others to see if we have answered all of them. There's one question I might get the submitter to give a little bit of clarification on. So it's what sort of verification of work term do you need, and will our assignments suffice? So I think that's probably a question on clarity in terms of saying what specific pieces of information do you require the employer to get to ensure that this is a student in a work-integrated learning opportunity. So I'll put that out there, and then the person that submitted the question can clarify as to whether or not that's their intent.
And I'll provide a preliminary response. In the contract that we have with the employer, we ask them to represent and warrant that they have verified that the individual is a student. And they are making a commitment to us in a contract that their intention is to have the individual work for 16 weeks minimum. They can go on beyond that, or 12 weeks, or whatever we have agreed with them. There are obviously extenuating circumstances if the employee doesn't show up. If he is completely unsuitable for a variety of reasons and gets terminated beforehand, we understand that, and that is addressed in the contract. But the employer is making a commitment to us and representing as a condition of our payment that they have done certain things, and that they are making a commitment to the student to give them meaningful employment as set out in the work plan. Hope if that answers it, great. If additional clarification is needed, happy to do so.
That's great. Thanks. Let's leave it at that, and we'll see if other questions come in. The next question relates to the specific criteria. So the question is, are there any other specific, for an employer, are there any other specific criteria for an employer in order to be eligible? So within aerospace and aviation, is it for-profit organizations? Any other criteria?
Virtually all of them are in the industry for-profit. So as long as they are working in our industry, whether it's manufacturing, maintenance, repair, and overhaul, a flight operator, airports, a helicopter company, and the positions within that can be an engineer, it can be a business person for the airline.
Science, as long as it falls under the science and technology or business?
And again, that's the reason we encourage them to send us the application before they hire the individual, just to make sure that we and ESDC are satisfied that they meet. The criteria are very broad, but we've seen some that just clearly don't qualify. So we'd like to make sure people are know that before they make a decision on hiring.
Great. So I have two questions that relate to business students that have come in. So the first is, can you give us some examples of the types of business roles that might qualify under your program?
So for us, business, again, as long as it's in the aviation aerospace industry, could be human resources. It could be project management. It could actually be in the accounting division. So those would be some examples. Great.
That's fantastic. The next question, and I might have missed this in your presentation, it's a question about on-site evaluations and reference to the fact that as co-op practitioners, it's quite common for us to have a midterm or a site evaluation where we go and meet with the student and meet with the employer and check in. Can you tell us a bit about what, if any, role you expect to play to that end?
And this is a question from Lucy Gendron that I'm seeing on my screen?
Yes, yeah.
Good. And we're thrilled to see that, frankly, and we would love to work with the college or university and the co-op department who is doing those evaluations, and we certainly wouldn't want to reinvent the wheel. And if it's already being done in an organized fashion, we would, I'm guessing, most likely defer to that and not redo it. But we do have in all the contracts that we do have the right to audit, specifically where there isn't any other verification, and we don't want to find out at the end of the project that the individual has been cleaning floors.
Right.
So we reserve the right to do that, and we will be following up with the student during the course of the work term. If we have concerns based on what we've heard from the student, then we would address it with a site visit. But we would be thrilled to have a university or co-op department doing that, and that would just make our life much easier, and I'm sure we have confidence in the work being done by those professionals.
This is a bit of an editorial comment, but it's one of the things that we're learning as we hear more about the specifics of the program, that there, for a formal co-op program in Canada, there are a fair number of redundancies between some of these SWIP components and what happens in a co-op program. So there might be some work for us to do to that end to articulate what the required components are of a co-op program, and that perhaps if it was a student undertaking the position as a co-op work term, that those pieces would be sort of taken as a matter of course, that the learning plan and the evaluations and so on and so forth. So some really interesting conversations, I think, for us to have in the months and years ahead.
And as your colleagues are talking to employers, co-op has a defined meaning in your world, and that's fine. Our eligibility for this program extends beyond that.
Yes.
So it need not be a technical co-op. It can be simply a 4-month placement at an employer with a structured work program or otherwise. So I realize you folks focus on technical co-ops, and frankly that really helps us when that's in place for all the reasons we talked about. But it's not restricted to that. So if you're talking to employers who have other needs, they may qualify as well.
That's great. Thank you. So there's two questions that I'm going to just address. One is, will we provide contact information at the end of the webinar? Yes, we will. Absolutely. We can go back to that. Perhaps Robert and Teresa can go back to that introductory slide, I think, is your contact information on the first slide?
No, I really I'm sorry we didn't. So
okay.
We'll send you
would it be best, Jenna, just to do that? Send an email?
Yes. Yeah, and the second question is, will we put the presentation available? Yes, we will put it up on the CAFCE website, and we'll have Teresa and Robert's contact information there as well. So,
perfect. Thank you.
We have another question here about the focus on the number of first-year students. I'm not exactly sure. It just says, can you comment on the focus on the number of first-year students?
Well, the first-year students are one of the underrepresented groups, so to speak, on the funding side. We would like them to get experience, because I know that's one of the groups that it's very hard for them to get in and get experience. We have already had some placements with first-year students, though. It is a focus of the program itself as well. That's the entire SWOP program. One of the focuses is to try and get experience for first-year students.
Great.
I'm not sure what else to say about that. I'm sorry. Was there an additional question for that?
Yeah, I think that's answering the question, and if we need further clarity, if the person that submitted that question could let us know. Business is an interesting one, in part because so many of us have business programs that we support through co-op. And so we're getting a couple more questions about business programs. So the questions are, would supply chain operations management or service management also be eligible business roles?
Yes, they would be.
Great.
At an aviation and aerospace company, yes.
Most likely, yes. And this is an interesting one that was asked in the ESDC webinar as well, and it is, does it have to be a business student doing a business role? Because quite often we have students from a number of disciplines working in business roles.
If it was a STEM student doing business roles, I would think that would most likely qualify. We need to see the specifics of what the students' studies are in and what the position with the company is, but I would expect that would qualify.
Thank you. That's very similar to what we chatted about with ESDC earlier this week. So right now we're looking at a focus that is STEM and business students in STEM and business roles. And those of you on the line that have seen CAFCE's budget submission for 2018, we are absolutely advocating that the parameters be extended for subsequent iterations of this program, but that does seem to be the box that we're working in with this initial rollout. Okay, let's see here. A couple of other questions. Logistics question, how and when would the employer receive the wage subsidy?
Generally at the end of the work term.
Mm-hmm. Great.
If that was a problem for an employer, I mean, we could be more flexible, but just the paperwork and et cetera, it's just easier for all concerned. The work term ends and we send them one check.
Great.
And we do send a physical check. At this time, we're not doing direct deposit.
Perfect. That, I'm sure, explicitly answers the question, so that's fantastic. So I believe you answered this question in your presentation, but just for clarity for the group, what is your minimum time requirement for a position to be approved?
Minimum would likely be 12 weeks. And we're not happy about 12 weeks, but
we prefer 16, but we would go with 12. But I think anything less than that wouldn't be the quality placement we're looking for.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see here. Would a first work term student be acceptable even in year 2? I'm not sure if that's a question about do they count as a first year student in year 2, and if that is the question, we did discuss that with ESDC, that first year means first they said first year means first calendar year. So their first year of studies, if they have a work term in that fall, winter, or spring term, then that would be a first year student. But if it is their first work term but they're a second year student, that it wouldn't count for the additional subsidy.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah, okay. That's good. We're all on the same page. Is there a mandate for you to consider students from all geographical regions?
Self-imposed.
Self-imposed. Great. Okay, so let's see. I think all of these questions we have just addressed in terms of how and when employers will receive their pay. One is how are subsidies paid out for 8-month and 12-month work terms. I'm not sure if that's a question to say could they qualify for a double subsidy if it's a double work term. I'm not sure. Maybe let's ask that question. If a student were doing a 32-week or a 40-week placement or back-to-back placements, how might that work?
Beyond 6 months, we would consider and discuss with the employer ahead of time. If it was a 12-month back-to-back placement, we would consider subject to available funding, we would consider that, we would look at whether that qualifies for 2 work terms.
Great.
We can't guarantee that, especially given the state of available funding this year, but it's something that was discussed by us with the SDC, so it's not impossible, but we can't guarantee it. And
Great.
It has to be at least beyond 6 months.
Yeah.
So 2 back-to-back 16 weeks, you don't get 2 placements.
Right. Great. Okay. Thank you. This next question I'm not sure about. The question is CCAA able to provide a list? I can't imagine this is something that can happen. Is CCAA able to provide a list of students hired under this funding after the work term? I'm not sure. Oh, is that for internal records? So to connect with the school to provide a list of students that received wage subsidies? Perhaps that's the question. It took me a minute there. So if, for example, I'm at the University of Waterloo, if there were 6 University of Waterloo students that received wage subsidies as part of this program, is that something that you are able to inform the school of? And if not, how might we have a sense of which students are participating in these programs? Through the employer?
It's not something that we had contemplated. I can certainly see why a college or university would like that, and it's something that it's information we'd like you to have. Not sure what the easiest way to do that is. Perhaps if you can get the information through students, great. If you cannot, we will have that information available. It's just not something we'd contemplated. I'm not sure we would have the contact at the PSI.
Right.
So we haven't looked at it, but we're not opposed to the idea, and we can certainly see the value. Just what's the easiest way for you guys to get that information? If the only way is through us, we'll do our best to help.
And thank you very much for that. One thing I should add in that the membership may have heard a little bit about, but probably not in detail, is that ESDC is exploring ways to centralize these operations. So in terms of working with Magnet, working with the other job posting platforms, to have a centralized location for verifying that it is a registered student, that the student is in a work-integrated learning program, and so on and so forth. So that kind of question is really valuable to us and to ESDC as they map out that work, and we can certainly share that back, that one of the outcomes of this centralized technological solution should be an easy download for institutions to see which of their students have benefited from these types of programs. So for now, it's one of the comments, Robert and Teresa, that we're hearing is sort of 5 different programs, 5 different processes, but we are looking towards ways to streamline this for everyone involved.
And that would be good.
Yeah. So perhaps this is a bit of a rehash, but I'll take it back to you because it's bubbled up in a couple of questions. So we had discussed that employers should be approved for the funding before they hire, before they start their recruiting. Can you just give us sort of an overview of from start to finish how that would work? Employer reaches out to CCAA. Can you just go over that one more time for the group?
Sure. So if an employer reached out to me I would have a conversation with them on the phone, explain the program, send them the information sheet if they didn't already have it or didn't get it off our website, and send the participant form, the student form, and the employer form that needs to be filled out. They're fillable PDFs. They would complete the forms, have the signature on both of those, and send them back to me. We would review those, approve or not. And again, if the company is somebody we have not yet in this program done a contract with for a wage subsidy type program, we would put that in place.
So the two forms, phone call, two forms, which give us the information to evaluate it, and then a standard form contract. And we have a contract with ESDC, so we need to make sure that those provisions are reflected in our contract with the employer. Simple example, ESDC reserves the right to cancel funding if they don't get budget approval or stuff like that. They've got all kinds of Government of Canada clauses in there. We need to have those same provisions in place with the employer.
Great, thank you. Thanks for going over that again. That's really helpful. So the last question that I have here, and there may be one or two that pop in as we're chatting, but for now it's, can you tell us a bit about the requirements for jobs to be new or additional hires for the winter 2018 work term? So the net new piece is kind of a bit unclear, I think.
Well, I believe the target for us anyways, our target is 15% are new hires or new placements, not just if you always offer 3 placements and this year you're still offering 3 placements but you're getting subsidies, it's not a new placement. And our goal is 15% per year. Increase
in co-op students in our industry. I'm not sure that was Karen's question or not. Does it have to be a new hire, meaning somebody who has not worked for the company before? The answer is yes. But once they're in the program, they can come back for successive terms.
Great. Okay.
Teresa's
looking at me indicating that I am wrong on that.
No, I'm indicating that we haven't actually read a regulation on that or had that in our contract, I don't believe, or actually have come across that question if it has to be. If it's somebody you hired 2 years ago and now this program is available and you want to fund the same person, we do, like I said, we have a target of 15% completely new placements for companies.
If you've had them for 3 years in the past and you're doing them again this year for their 4th work term,
no.
Probably not,
okay.
Because we're looking to create new positions. But where, as I alluded to earlier, with this 4-year planning, if somebody came to us and said, right, we'd like this student to go through a structured learning plan over 4 years, could we approve it for 4 years? I would say yes, subject to funding in the final 2. Is that a sufficient answer to Karen?
We'll leave that to Karen, and we'll see if she has additional questions on that. I would certainly say, sorry, what's that?
We're learning too.
Yes. Well, and I think that's where all of these questions are coming from. So when we were chatting again earlier this week with ESDC, they were really focusing on this net new, and we know how tricky that is to actually measure because we have employers that hire from across post-secondary schools, from colleges and universities, and really what is that baseline, and how do we calculate net new. So aiming to, as we have discussed in earlier conversations, really help raise the awareness of the value of work-integrated learning, to get more employers on board, to help them see the additional ways that student talent can help them meet their business objectives. And we did get another question. So could an employer receive pre-approval for funding, identify a student through a co-op program, and have the student submit the paperwork after? If so, how long would that window be for identifying a student? So I think it's they've got a job.
Sorry, I interrupted. Sorry.
No, not at all. They've got a job, they come to you, you approve it as a qualified position, and then they go to their recruit through the co-op cycle.
But we'd have to actually verify the student's eligibility as well, so.
We could tell them that there is still funding available as of today, and that position would likely qualify if the student did, but we couldn't lock that in until we saw the student and approved them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really helpful, and I think that's another area where as we continue to think through processes and streamlining, looking at existing approved co-op programs, there could be real opportunities in there to leverage the existing recruitment cycles and so on and so forth with the guaranteed approvals that the student is in a STEM position and a registered student and so on and so forth.
And thinking this through, we too are interested in some form of certainty for the industry, but it is difficult for us to say, okay, fine, we're going to block 10 spots for you, which you can fill over the next year. That's just not fair to the rest of the industry. But if there's a halfway house in there, we are happy to say, yes, this would qualify, and we still have funds available, and they're likely to have it for another 2 months based on current trends. But I would be reluctant to promise that if they get a qualified student within a time frame, that we would still have funds available.
And so I'm thinking very much from the logistical side of things in terms of co-op processes here, and we just got another question that you might see, Robert and Teresa, from Bill, which is following on that. So what would that time frame be for hiring? Let's say our cycles, if we had an employer, they've developed this job, perhaps they've developed it in tandem with a post-secondary institution, as they often do. So we've got what we think is a great work-integrated learning opportunity for a student. The employer approaches you. You agree that that would be a really valuable learning opportunity, and now they're going to go to a university or college and go through their recruitment cycle. And that might be a 2-week time frame, or it might be a 2-month time frame. What's your window for the hiring component?
And again, as Teresa says, we a lot of questions coming up here that we hadn't thought through yet. So thank you for that, Bill and the others who helped our own thinking on this. And we don't have a firm answer at this point. I don't know what that is, but we would certainly want it sooner rather than later. If somebody came to us in the winter term in March and said we're hiring at the end of May, I'd have no problem with that.
Okay.
No, that's reasonable. It's 3 months, and I think
if
that's
somebody
reasonable.
said to us in December, we're hiring next July, probably not. If you ask me what the rule is, I don't know.
Yep. And absolutely, that is how we learn.
Something as far off as a year would likely be a
Definitely
no.
a no.
6 months, we'll have to actually have some internal discussions on that, but 3 months is very reasonable.
Great. Okay, I think that's very helpful to those of us that are used to dealing with these hiring cycles and the different ebbs and flows of job postings and actually matching students with those job postings. So,
2 other quick comments. We want to be helpful, and if some of our answers are causing you aggravation, let us know, and we're happy to revisit it or look at alternatives. As I say, we haven't thought of some of these issues, so if our answers are providing obstacles, let us know.
Yeah.
Give us some suggestions or explain to us why this is an obstacle, and we will do our best to address it. And supplementing my earlier answer, so the general rule would be call it 3 months for want of a better term. But if somebody came to us and said, I want to hire this person for the next 4 work terms, I think we would consider that. Would we not, Teresa?
Well, that's the sort of long-term planning we're looking at. But if we had too many of that, then we are,
yes.
They're not taking too big of a dent on the funds. And so we do need to actually develop an internal guideline, I think, for the number.
Yes, if it's a one-off, we'd look at shorter rather than longer. But if an employer came to us, as some are, and saying, we want to put in place a program over 4 years, and we know they're serious and they've already started hiring and this sort of thing, we would certainly not refuse that outright simply because they're in year 2, 3, and 4. But we can't fill the whole program with 2, 3, and 4 year placements.
Great, thank you. So we have one last question that you gave us a little bit of a sense of earlier in the webinar, but perhaps a good way to end things off. Is there funding still available for the winter 2018 work term?
So
I won't answer, I'll let Teresa.
Yeah. So the winter term, I believe, is that December or January?
January, yeah.
January. We still have funding available right now, but we're also getting so many calls on a daily basis that I wouldn't doubt if you left it to December and we're looking for it in December or January, I don't think we would have it left, to be honest. And our next fiscal starts in April with new positions. So
okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I would say that if within the next month, if somebody has a spot, something in mind, they should really be contacting us now.
Okay, that is fantastic. Those are all of the questions that we've received from the membership thus far. Thank you to both of you for working through the logistics of the program, for dealing with our questions as they come at you left, right, and center, and I think probably most importantly for your receptivity to our feedback and your openness to learning more about the ways in which we operate co-op programs. And I think these are the real partnerships that will add value as we learn a bit more about each other's worlds and try to find ways to create these quality opportunities for our students.
And thanks to you, Anne, and to CAFCE and all of the people participating on this call. We're thrilled to have you as a partner in this venture. And if there's ways, as I alluded to earlier, that things we're doing that we can do better, we're very receptive to that. And to anyone on the phone, you will have our contact info, so feel free to contact Teresa anytime.
That's wonderful.
There you go.
Thank you so much. And yes, just as a reminder to everyone, we will put the webinar up on the CAFCE website within the next couple of days, and we will have Teresa's contact information for sure up for you as well.
Only because she's smarter and more knowledgeable.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.